Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On today's episode, for the second time in 4 months, a fight night card, not at the Apex. We'll talk about it. Brandon Moreno says he wants to chill for a bit. Órale pues. You do you, vato. And Bobby Knuckles versus Borg on ABC this summer. What? I like that matchup. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. Look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. SBC creator Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's the reason we gather here every Monday, noon Eastern. He's coming to you live from Las Vegas. Down in Sofla, it's Danny Segura from Hablemos MMA. You know, any Spanish-speaking fans, MMA fans, tell them to give it a listen. Hablemos MMA. And up in Beantown, it's Nolan King, a recent nominee for Best Journalist at the World MMA Awards. Great to have the Boston shot caller back on SBC. Muscles in Las Vegas, formerly known as Cold Coffee, but he's been jacking up the weights lately. He's on the ones and twos. But before we get started, if you would kindly hit that like button like right now, I'd greatly appreciate it. If you don't, well, let's just hope you can live with yourself and the yellow card I just gave you. Anyway, all right, guys, fight night, not at the Apex. That was nice, huh? Fans, you know, I like it. So, but that 7 p.m. start with 14 fight card slate, that one kind of hurts. Let's start unpacking the big ones here. In the main event, Manon Fiorot cruised to unanimous decision win over Erin Blanchfield. These are top dogs in the women's flyweight division. She possibly, I don't know, solidified herself as the next title contender once Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko 3 takes place. Or did she, guys? Yay or nay? Goes. What did you think of the matchup and the fight and what came out of it?
I thought absolutely a yay. She definitely deserves it. It's just time maybe isn't on her side right now, but we'll get to that in a second. You know, the performance itself, like George, that card, I was so happy that it was in front of fans and everything, but it just, the night kind of dragged on. And that fight, once she knew she could stop Erin Blanchfield's takedown, Erin Blanchfield had a little bit of a plan B. I do respect that at one point she did try and strike and go at her a little bit, but it just wasn't going her way. And I think Mano, once she figured that out, she just maybe played it a little safe at the end, but it was a dominating performance. But it wasn't, it kind of had a little bit of that feeling of the Muhammad Mokaev fight, right? And that's something that sort of cost him in a bit. That's what we've been talking about, right? With Steve Erceg. This had a little bit of that feeling, but not as much. So now you look going forward, what's going to happen with her? Well, really, it just comes down to time. You know, the two gals booked over here in Las Vegas coaching tough, that's going to throw a little bit of a wrench in her plans. And normally when people sit around and wait for things, it doesn't always work out in their favor. So if I'm in her corner, if I'm her management, I feel terrible saying it, but I think she probably needs to take one more to stay active, especially going into a big title fight against whoever comes out of Shevchenko and Grasso. Those are top dogs. Like, you want to be sharp. And I'm not so sure sharp is the best way to describe this past performance. I think she could have been a little better. So I think maybe one more fight would do her some help, but it sucks that she has to take it.
50-45, though, is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
Is it just the lack of a finish, maybe? Like that we're all looking for out of a 5-round main event?
Yeah, because it seemed like she had her number early on. She figured out the riddle, but she just wasn't able to put it away. And I think that's something that the UFC has kind of shown, that that's what they're looking for. That's what they want at the end. So if you give it some time, I don't know. I mean, the two ladies that are waiting, they're tough and they're getting better. So if I'm her, you know, we've already seen Rose Namajunas. I don't know that that's something that I'd want to see again so quickly, but maybe like a Macy Barber or someone like that.
All right. Nolan, you were there. Yay or nay? Did she possibly solidify herself as the next contender? Remember, folks, it's 1-0-1 in that trilogy that's going to happen here with Shevchenko and Grasso. If Shevchenko ticks that box and it's 1-1-1, you could have what's called a tetralogy or something like that. Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, yay, she deserves it. Nay, does she solidify it? No. I mean, anytime that the UFC is in this sort of position where they're looking to book contenders. I don't think that they're necessarily, unless you are Sean O'Malley, that they're going to have you be cool with you sitting out on the sidelines for a year and not taking fights, especially when there are other contenders that you haven't fought in that division. So while I think she very much deserves it, I think her claim before the fight about having essentially taken multiple title eliminators at this point, I do think that's accurate. I do feel like she's probably going to have to fight again. I know the UFC has an event rumored for the end of the year or the second half of the year in Paris. Will they want to put her on that? Will that kind of twist her arm a little bit to compete again? I'm not sure. But if I was her team, depending on, again, how much the financials play into it, like I disagree with Goes. I think I would want her to sit out. Like, I think the guaranteed money that comes from a title fight, from getting that title challenger pay bump would be super worth it. And obviously, I don't think that the UFC, like you just mentioned, George, if we ended up in a scenario here where it was 1-1-1, I can't imagine them running it back immediately again. But maybe they would. So it is a very tricky situation. I think that the odds say that she will have to fight again. But if this was a different time, a different division, a different time in the division, she would probably be the one fighting for the belt next.
Mm-hmm. Danny, you're the tiebreaker here, man. What are your thoughts? We got a lot of interesting pieces here because France is popping. You can tell it hasn't blown up like other countries, like Mexico, for example. And Mexico, of course, is now that's Grasso. She's the top dog for that country with Brandon Moreno stepping aside. We'll get to that in just a second. Yair's lost a couple in a row. They haven't developed the next big star. So what do you think, man? What's the right play here?
Man, this is a bit of a headache because even before this fight, you had multiple people that deserved a title shot. That if you were to give them a title shot, there would be no complaints because they would have done enough by that point, right? I think before this fight, Fiora deserved a shot. I think before this fight, Blanchfield deserved a shot. I think Macy Barber deserves a shot right now. But because we have those two ladies, Grasso and Shevchenko, fighting at the top continuously because of the results, now the top contenders are going to have to fight each other. Look, this is such a tough one. Goes makes an excellent point. I know inactivity can be a big detriment to a lot of fighters. But if you look at Fiorot, man, she's 34 years old. If she were to lose, I don't know how much time she has for another run to make it for the belt, especially like a prime Fiorot. So I would suggest that she would sit out. I know the rumor show in Paris could be a thing, but look, title fights are way more important than fighting in front of your home crowd, in my opinion. So I would just campaign for the backup role, hope that maybe something happens to somebody, not terribly, but at least so they can slide in and end up fighting for the title in September. And if not, be right there to fight the winner and hope that Grasso beats Shevchenko just so there will be no fourth fight. But I would suggest her to sit out because if you look at her record, you know, she beat Tabata Ricci, she beat Mayra Bueno Silva, who just fought for the belt. She beat Jennifer Maia, Kaylin Chookagian, both former UFC title challengers. Rose Namajunas, former champion, and now Erin Blanchfield, top contender. I don't care who you are. Yes, Fiorot is good, but if you keep fighting ladies of that level, you're throwing the dice every time. And we know there's always a factor of luck in these fights. And I don't know how much she can keep that factor at bay. I mean, she's fought already several top girls, and she's come out the winner. So I would suggest her to sit out. Title shots don't come often. She's clear the number one contender at 125. So sit out, wait your turn, hope that something happens, and yeah, see how the cards play out.
Would you guys not have her as the favorite against Barber?
Man, Barber's looking really, really good. And something that I didn't like about this main event, and I think a lot of people kind of agreed, it wasn't that much of an exciting fight. It just felt like the first round kind of just played over 5 times. There wasn't really much of a difference between each round. It was just kind of like the same 5 minutes playing like over. A Floyd
Mayweather fight or something.
Yeah, Barber is someone that if Plan B doesn't work, if Plan F doesn't work, she'll find Plan B, find Plan C, and if Plan B doesn't work, she'll make it work. Like she's someone that's just a hammer and is a very dangerous fight. And man, she's highly motivated right now. She's on a 6-fight win streak. I would advise her against fighting Macy Barber. I would probably have her as the favorite, but man, that's such a tough fight. She could definitely lose that one.
Yeah,
You know,
I think I would honestly, I think I would favor Manon at this point. I'd have to go back and watch maybe a little more tape. But even though the fight wasn't, Saturday's main event was weird. I just put it that way. Like Danny said, it was very repetitive. Kind of one of those fights where you're staring and you almost feel like you're just watching a replay over and over again. But I did feel like it was never a question of like who was winning. Like scoring wise, it was very dominant. But in terms of like the means to get that victory, the margin wasn't that great. So it was a weird fight. But I do think what she does is she's very good at what she does. And it's almost frustrating
and moving,
to
right?
watch. It's very frustrating for the
Yeah.
opponents. It's frustrating for the fans at times, as we heard online and some of the boos in that arena. So
It's a little Wonder Boy-ish,
I would
right?
favor her though. Yeah. It's in that same category.
Yeah. For one, I would try and fight her at the Apex, smaller octagon. In fact, maybe you can tell me, was it the 25 or the 30 foot?
George, you're rooting to go back to the Apex, man?
I know, but I'm just saying that's the only way I would do it with her.
Atlantic
Here's the
City
weird
fans
thing, guys.
are great. That was a very cool venue, by the way. The venue was great.
Well, half of them
Fans
were at the
great.
Jersey Shore though. By the end, I mean that thing went on for like 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah,
So
$2.1 million gate too. So I mean, anyways, I'm sorry I saw red when you started talking about bringing it back to the Apex.
Well, here's the thing. Macy Barber is on a 6-fight win streak. I love her to death, man. And Danny's right. Plan B, plan C. If one of those plans is the kitchen sink, she'll ask favor. You got the kitchen sink there? I'm gonna hit this bitch or whatever. She is just a gangster, right? But 5 of her 6 fights have gone to a decision. So what is it about her? Is it maybe what I just said? She's just scrappy. She's connecting with the fans, and we're actually introducing her as a potential derailer of Manon Fiorot's plans. And then when you hear what Danny said about who she's gone through, it's like, damn, respect. Like, why are we messing with Fiorot's run at the title? How do we explain this?
I mean, the performances have to be big. I mean, look at what's happening at 145 at men's, right? Like Evloev is clearly just racking up these wins. He's really good. And then they even asked Gideon, he's like, yeah, he's killing it. He's good. He's on a crazy win streak, but you got to show us more. You got to excite us. Like at the end of the day, the UFC is trying to put on a show. That's their product. They're trying to sell pay-per-views. They're trying to entertain the fans on a Saturday night. And Fiorot, very, very skilled fighter, at times has given us some moments, but you can't compare it to the madness, to the craziness, to the chaos that Macy Barber brings. I mean, just look at that Amanda Ribas fight again and that finish. I mean, she's just on fire, and there's a level of meanness about her that I think a lot of people appreciate it, whether you're a fan or not, as far as Macy Barber herself. But her fighting style, it's undeniable. I mean, it's super exciting, and it's what people want to see. I do want to make a point. I know you're not asking this, George, but it was a bit of a revelation for me on Saturday. I feel like this has been my division. I've said it multiple times on this program that this has been my favorite division in the women's side for quite some time now. And part of it is because it's so competitive. Like you can see so many of these ladies being champion. You can see that, they're all pretty evenly matched. But after Saturday, I would say my perspective changed quite vastly. And I feel like Alexa Grasso is kind of like, of course she's the champion, but in terms of scale, I do feel like she's like a pretty clear leader as far as being the number one. I feel like she's better than Shevchenko. She's proven that in both fights, even though one of them was a draw. And hold on,
draw. She proved she was better in that
fight. Hear me out. For the longest time, I felt like the one was Erin Blanchfield, right? Like that one was going to be a tough one. But after watching her against Fiorot and after watching what Fiorot did striking wise, I'm sorry, but I feel like we might have a champion here for quite some time.
Man, for one, I just think Valentina was better in fight number 2 than Alexa. But yeah, so I guess I would just start by disagreeing there. I do agree that what Fiorot did looked like something both Alexa and Shevchenko can do, because they're athletic, especially Shevchenko. She can replicate a little bit of that. Alexa, I don't know. I've seen her get taken down, but more of that it comes from, I guess, when she was just starting off as a strawweight. To be fair, she's done very, very, very well as a flyweight. How about this? Obiara Smith. And we welcome these comments and questions in the chat. So bring them. If they're good, I'll put them on. If you're going to tell us, your mother sucks or what, it's not going to get on. So you can have fun with yourself or whatever. But be serious. This is a serious show, and we put a lot into it. So you guys can be a part of it. Biora Smith says Aaron overrated. He kept it simple. Nolan, what do you think, man? Is he going overboard here on one fight?
No, I mean, I think she's still super young. She has, hasn't really had a lot of these lessons yet. I think there was anybody that watched tape on her knew that her striking defense and sometimes the offense was, there were holes that were shown, leading up to this fight. I think there's obviously going to have to be, going back to the drawing board, being able to learn from pretty clear areas that she needs to improve in. I wouldn't be writing her off yet. It's one loss, and she had kind of a close, controversial loss on the come up, and she continued to improve. So, no, I mean it's one loss, and she's young and has so much time left. So I wouldn't be saying that that's it for her.
Mm-hmm. Joseph
George,
Boza says, I heard and
24.
saw online, no joke, that Manon was being compared to Ian Machado Gary. Is that fair, Goes?
No, look, overrated to me is like a very strong word. I think it's just safe to say that we all saw her performance and said she still has work to do. But I think she deserves all the praise that she got for what she was able to accomplish to that moment.
Right. Harris in the chat says, who is your top 5 GOATs? Harris, did you hear me say, welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the GOATs of MMA. These are the 5 biggest stories, pal. Come on, get with it a little bit. Guys, any final thoughts on this main event before we move on to the co-main?
I just think, look, with everything that we just said, right? If Macy Barber were to take another fight and look impressive, maybe even get a stoppage,
yes,
I think we would all be on SBC talking about, well, Manofro was the girl, but did you see what Macy Barber did? And that's the only reason why I feel like Mano needs to maybe nip that in the bud and get ahead of it. Just because I feel like she would still be favored over all these girls. So I think
either way, she has to fight her at some point, right? Because if she wins, Barber would probably be a contender. There's always that feeling from veterans. Maybe I can get someone before they get better. Like Danny pointed out, there's like a 9-year gap here, and Barber keeps getting better and scrappier. So who knows? That might be the play if they're going to Paris, France later on. Who knows?
And Macy has one advantage, and she speaks the language, right? So she can put an awesome promo out there to get on her side. Whereas with Mano, it's, what are your 2 translators over here? I don't know why that happened. What do they have to say? Like, that's an advantage for her,
Poor Derek, man. He's actually a great translator. I didn't know he knew French, but yeah, they misused him.
Eric's
Bisping would talk to her. He would tell her what Bisping's saying. She would answer in French. And then some guy popped out of nowhere. It looked like someone that's what do you call it like a photo bomber, I guess, a video bomber, an interview bomber. He's all of a sudden starts stepping in. I guess he was her coach or something, and seemed to do a pretty good job, but that was a little bit of little awkward. So they had going on the road rust, the production team, since they're not at their cozy apex. Let's talk about the co-main event. Joaquin Buckley dispatched of Vicente Luque in the co-main event, and in the process, he made use of his post-fight mic time, but not to the best of his ability. What kind of a splash did this young fella make in your eyes? We go back to the 305, Danny Segura.
Huge. I feel like for a while now, I've kind of had a picture in my mind of like what the ceiling is for Joaquin Buckley, right? Like we've seen him have good performances. We saw him with that crazy knockout, but we've also seen his limitations. But that was at 185 pounds. Since his move down to the welterweight division, he's on a 3-fight win streak, and that being this finish over Vicente Luque, who not so long ago was a top 5 contender and has been in the top 10 in the UFC's welterweight division forever. So I don't know what the ceiling is now, but I definitely do think we gotta remove it and kind of look up and analyze again to see how far this guy can go, because I do feel like at 170 he can go way farther than he can at 185. The athleticism, the power, the strength is still all there. Now he's fighting smaller guys that can't wrestle him and control him as easily, and he's a threat, man. I'm curious to see how far he goes, and there's so many good matchups for him at 170. I do think, and I agree with you, he could have used the post-fight interview. He just beat Vicente Luque in a co-main event. Like he could have used that mic time to call somebody out, to get a sexy fight, to kind of prop himself out, even not call anybody out, but put the welterweight division on notice. I'm back. I'm gonna knock everyone out, whatever it is. And he didn't do that. But still, at the end of the day, what matters, what's the most important part is the results, and he got that. So curious to see where he goes next. I thought it was a great performance, and I think at 170, he could be a contender. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. He gave us the location. He wants to go to St. Louis. It's 6 weeks away, so it's feasible. He didn't look like he took too much damage in this fight. But yes, give us the name. Let that hit some traction. By the time you get back to your post-fight, they're asking you about the guy's response, whoever it was you called out. You had an Ian Gary, a Colby Covington, whoever. There's some layups
MVP.
out there, man. These guys will respond to you. Yeah, MVP. Nolan, man, what was the feeling like for Joaquin Buckley? Did he make the splash by taking out a top 10 guy that where we should be, all of a sudden putting him against some of these names we just discussed?
Yeah, absolute statement. You look at the guys that they were trying to match Vicente Luque up with before this fight. We're talking Ian Machado Gary. We're talking Kevin Holland. We're talking Sean Brady, those sort of bigger names. And so for Joaquin Buckley to go out there and just do what he did and finish Vicente Luque and somewhat make it look easy, that to me is massive, massive feather in his cap. And with this St. Louis event rolling around, I know him and I had a little discussion backstage there at the press conference about how he's not going to fight on that card unless they undo the Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento main event. We know the UFC is not going to do that probably, but we've seen them put 5-round co-main events recently. They did one in Austin. I don't think there would be a better time for the UFC to get on the Buckley train than right now. Put him in a co-main event. Maybe do it 5 rounds if the right opponent's there. You got to put him on that card. I think it would really take his stardom to the next level. Watching that for people that aren't familiar with him to kind of see that crowd get behind him and have him have a big marquee matchup. It's just, that seems like a layup to me right now, especially where people are maybe not as thrilled with the St. Louis co-main event as they'd like to be. So make this card deep. Give us another good fight at the top there. Even if it's not the main event, maybe a 5-round co-main if the right opponent's there. But yes, it's Buckley's time for a marquee matchup. He stepped up. He's been asking for a top 10 fighter. Go to his Instagram. There's everybody's face from the division is on some sort of call out post. So for him to get it and go out there and show that he is a top 15 fighter in this division, I think he's earned himself the opportunity to get a little bit more promotional push and be put at home in a big fight in front of his home crowd.
So Nolan, help the guy out a little bit. Who do you think? Put it out there. Who do you think would be a great matchup for him? I love what you just said. A 5-round co-main event in St. Louis for Joaquin Buckley. Who would make the most sense that would get the crowd out of their seats?
Well, I mean, the Kevin Holland fight I thought would have been great to revisit at this point, but I asked him about that, and he doesn't seem necessarily that interested in that. So I don't know, man. I mean, if you look at the somewhere in the the 10 to 15 range, somewhere in the 8 to 15 range, whoever's available. Sean Brady comes up in my brain, but I don't necessarily think that would be like the most thrilling matchup for the fans. Just stylistically. So maybe if he keeps going out there and throws out, Kevin, if he can U-turn and maybe go lean back into the Kevin Holland rivalry, I'd love to see that one.
I want to throw a couple names out there.
Sure.
I think the MVP matchup is great, and I think the guys in the comments can agree. I think a lot of people are throwing that name out there. And another matchup that I would absolutely love, Jeff Neal. I think that would be a fantastic fight.
Good one too.
That is good. Those are good names. Goes, I want to focus a little bit on Vicente Luque. This guy's been in the top 10 for a long time, man. Punching the clock, but he has lost 3 of his last 4. I wouldn't go so far as I sit to pee. Nice to see Elvis Johnson in the chat. He says rigged fight. Can't explain why Luque just fell and laid there. I mean, I don't think it was a rigged fight. I know they're in an area of monster land. I get the joke. But what do you think is going on with Vicente Luque? That did not look like the scrappy dog that we've been covering for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes fighters just kind of age overnight. The comment about throwing a fight. No, we didn't throw the fight. But what you can say and what has been kind of tossed around was when you just go down and cover up that way. Look, man, 3 years ago, maybe you get a pass. But now we know that if that's all you're going to do, that fight is going to get stopped. So if you want to say maybe he was looking for a way out, I can understand that type of criticism, right? The same way today, if a fighter were to say, I can't see, and they stop the fight, you have no right to sit there and go, why you stopped the fight? Like, we all know that's what happens We all know if you go to the floor and cover up, they're gonna stop it. And he just got overwhelmed. And you got to give Buckley a lot of credit though too. I mean, that kid's a lot better than a lot of people give him credit for, and he came to fight.
Yeah, I know he had a serious injury that he came back from that affected the skull area, bleeding in the brain or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess it'll always be on my mind if he fights through that mentally as well. You know, you get hit and you feel something, you just never know what somebody who's been doing this for a long time might be thinking at that particular moment. Wish him the best. Like I say, he's been a dog for years. He knows how to finish you with the feet. He's got some great chokes. I was expecting a little bit more of a test for Buckley, but again, without knowing what happened, we just wish him the best. It seems like he's just had a bad run ever since Gary backed out of the fight with pneumonia back in December, and now this. Terrible, but always a fan of that guy. All right, let's move on. So another big fight from hashtag UFC Atlantic City was seeing Chris Weidman compete again. The former champ got locked up in the cage with Bruno Silva and finished. Decisioned the Brazilian. The fight came to a halt in round 3 via eye pokes. Strikes. Yes, this fight was marred by controversy. Yes, I'm a jackass for laughing along at this whole deal. But man, there's so many ways that this could have ended more properly, I think, for the way we stomach endings to a fight, right? You throw the fouls aside, this fight was pretty entertaining. Did the commission get it right after huddling it up? Because there was an end to the fight, Nolan, right? But the result still doesn't sit right with a lot of us.
Yeah, and it looks like we also
and I want to welcome Big John McCarthy to the panel. Just saw him pop in here right now. Big John, your ears must have been ringing because we're just tackling the Chris Weidman topic. I'll let Nolan chime in, and then maybe you can weigh in as well. Did you get that? Weighing in? Got it. Okay.
Here's the thing, right? I think with the TKO seemed very wrong to me. Having a fighter get clearly poked in the eye twice, go down, not be given any sort of benefit of the doubt, not be given any sort of timeout, and then just say, hey, man, sorry, you just got finished with punches. That obviously would have been the wrong outcome. Now, the decision seems to me to be a little bit more correct. I know a lot of people online were kind of complaining as well. I think the bottom line is here that there was a foul that was missed. There's an error. There's already some sort of mistake that was made. So we've got to figure out, how do we correct this? How do we proceed forward? For them to go to the scorecards, Chris Weidman was already winning. He won the first round, he won the second round, and was winning the third round in the judges' eyes. So he had the scorecards in his favor. So in that regard, I think that was one of the more fair outcomes that they could come up with, would be to go to the scorecards. The other options would be to have it be a no contest, would be to deduct points from Chris Weidman, a point or two, which if it was 1 point, it wouldn't have an impact. If it was 2, it would make it a draw. And then, the other option would be disqualification. So I don't think that there's any sort of perfect scenario when a foul is missed. And obviously I'll let John kind of weigh in on maybe some of why these other routes weren't taken. But we saw, I don't know if people remember, in way back when Ovince St. Preux and Jean Vellante fought in Newark, New Jersey. It was right when Strikeforce was merged over, and a similar thing happened. I think it was 30 seconds into the round. I think somebody got poked. I think it was Vellante got poked, and they had to score that 30 seconds as a whole round, and people were talking about it then. So it's not something, technical decisions aren't something we haven't seen before. But I do think largely the protocol would be right, unless they decided that there should be a disqualification or that there should be points taken. And I'll let John maybe talk about that moment where they're trying to decide which avenue to go down, how it works out.
I want to welcome the host of Weighing In, John McCarthy, of course, a big figure in our sports. Him and Josh Thompson have a great podcast. Check it out, Weighing In. John, thanks for popping in last minute. We really value your expertise here. That just didn't sit right with a lot of fans, media, other fighters. 2 egregious eye pokes, man. In one combo, contributed heavily to the ending of that fight. There was also prior eye pokes from both parties on both sides, and it looked like Copeland had given them enough of a warning to say, hey, this could impact my decision making going forward, meaning points are going to start coming off, guys. at some point because this is just getting out of hand. Now, that said, I also saw Chris Weidman. I don't know if you call it parrying or gauging his distance, but the fingers kept sticking out, and Copeland failed to address that, in my opinion, at that moment. But take it from here, what did you see play out here in Atlantic City?
Well, when you're taking a look at what happened as far as, the stopping of the fight, I don't think Gary Copeland saw those eye pokes at that moment that the fight really came to an end. He didn't see what occurred. He saw that later in an instant replay and was advised of it and then made a decision. And this whole thing comes down to the decision making that the referee had in the fight, because when he first made the decision to stop the fight based upon Bruno Silva not being able to intelligently defend himself, he stops the fight and he awards it as a TKO victory to Chris Weidman. But it was fouls that actually hurt Bruno Silva. He was put into a position where he couldn't see. He got poked in both eyes, and he was dropping down based upon the eye pokes, not because he was hurt by a punch or anything that was a legal blow. So right away, you can look and you say you can't have a TKO victory, just like Nolan was saying. That doesn't sit well. It's wrong, because you're having a fight awarded to a fighter TKO based upon an unfair practice, a foul. So it really comes down to the New Jersey State Athletic Commission. They see on the instant replay, hey, he got poked in the eye. Gary, how are you calling that eye poke? And really what it comes down to is when Gary Copeland says it was unintentional, is what I'm going to say. Now, since it's in the third round, there is no contest. You've entered the third round of the fight. Under the rules, the first two rounds have been scored. We're going to have the judges score what took place in the third round. They will give it that score. They all gave it a 10-9 to Chris Weidman, and Chris Weidman was, given a technical decision victory over Bruno Silva. The only way it could have changed out is if Gary Copeland had decided, look, I've told him multiple times, to close his hand. He kept doing it. And I'm not saying he wanted to, poke him in the eye, but it was intentional that he's putting his fingers out in that fashion continuously. I'm going to say it's intentional. And with it being intentional and with it being a foul that obviously had damage because it ended up stopping the fight, I automatically, under the rules, I've got to take 2 points. I can't take just one. I would have to take 2 points from Chris Weidman. So in the third round, if he had done that way, it puts it in the position of Bruno Silva cannot lose the fight. Chris Weidman cannot win the fight. Under the unified rules, Bruno Silva, based upon that being a foul that was intentional and did damage, in that situation, the only thing that he can do is, at best, get a win, at worst, get a draw. Same thing with Chris Weidman. The best that he can do is a draw. The worst that he can do is he could lose, but he cannot win the fight. So even if Chris Weidman, they took 2 points from him, the final score would have ended up somewhere 28-27 on the scorecards, Chris Weidman being the winner. But based upon the rules, he cannot win that fight. The best he can get is a draw, and the fight would have come out as a draw between Chris Weidman and Silva.
Big John, could he have just disqualified him?
Yeah, absolutely. He could have disqualified him. That's a choice that, he had the ability to make, but he didn't feel that. Obviously, by just saying that it was unintentional, he really didn't feel that Chris Weidman in any way meant to do that. And so, the DQ probably wasn't even a question in his mind, but yeah, he could have.
John, I have an issue with these rules.
Go ahead, Danny.
I have a lot of issues. All right, but look, listen. One of them is the dude still got poked in the eyes 4 times.
You're right,
and he lost. And I understand that the referee didn't see this as intentional, right? But in soccer, for example, even if you don't do anything intentional, even if it's still just a dangerous play, a dangerous foul, you were trying to go for the ball, but you still did something reckless, irresponsible, you can still get a yellow or even a red card. You can get kicked out of the game and get disqualified.
Sure.
Now, you really have to be a big POS in order to be out there intentionally trying to poke people's eyes. So I don't think we're going to see that very often. But was it irresponsible from Chris Weidman? 100%. He was still fighting with his hand open, and he had poked the guy 3 times prior, and we've seen it. They warned them about the rules in the locker room, and then we see them in the fight, and they just keep getting warnings, and it doesn't lead to anything. And that to me is very frustrating to watch. I guess my point is, should there be a change in the rules or adjusted that the definition is not if it was intentional or not? Because I don't think Chris Weidman is the type of guy to want to be eye poking somebody. But more like, was it responsible or not? Was it because he had been warned prior, and to me, I just can't stomach the fact that a guy got eye poked 4 times and he still lost a decision.
I totally understand what you're saying. And here's where it comes to, you bring up soccer, and yellow card, red card, great. Doesn't matter if it's soccer or if it's in fighting or anything like that. The biggest problem you have is with referees in MMA. The point deduction is a huge thing to do, and it's funny because Gary Copeland had taken a point in an earlier fight where you look, and it was a groin shot. And that was against Herbert Burns. And you look and you go, man, you took that even when the fighter who was fouled really wasn't damaged by it. And you gotta play those things out. And you got to say, how damaged was the person? Do I have to try to level this out by taking a point? Because a point deduction is a big thing in MMA, especially with only a 3-round fight. And you're talking, in soccer, they get a free kick. Okay, so what? It's easier to make those calls based upon things. We have people all the time saying, Joe Rogan says, hey, if a guy gets poked in the eye, automatic point deduction. Everyone would lose their minds if that's what happened, because it would alter fights so in a glaring fashion, because they say it about groin shots and they say it about eye pokes. You're going to have people winning fights that don't deserve to win fights based upon, oh, you said it's an automatic point deduction, so we're taking the points. There has to be some semblance of common sense when you're taking points in what you're doing in the fight. And in this situation, when you have someone that is continuously putting their fingers out, look, that rule was put into place because of John Jones. John Jones used to big brother everyone, putting his hand out there, and it was like, hey, we got to get away from someone being able to just put a pitchfork out in front of someone's face and have them try to dodge their head going by it. I mean, in some ways it's good because it's telling the fighter, get your head off the center line, but it's not fair. So that's why it's there. The biggest problem is the referees are not using it accordingly. They're allowing it to go on and on and on. And in this situation, you got to go by rules, and you got to have rules. Okay. And sometimes rules don't really work for the situation you have, but you have to have them. You have to follow them. It was there for them to have basically a no contest, but it would have been called a draw. A technical draw is what it would have been called. I think everyone would have been more satisfied with that outcome than they are with Chris Weidman getting the win and then basically saying stuff at the end that I don't think he was thinking about what he was saying, but it wasn't really good because that didn't help his situation.
John, let's rewind. How would you have handled it going back to when Copeland gives the warning, but Weidman's still putting the fingers out there? At what point do you stop it? And do you address him again with either a point deduction or a stern warning, or how do you interject yourself?
Yeah, you got to come to a point where you stop, and whether you're going to take points or whether you're going to give a hard warning, you're going to tell Chris Weidman, I'm telling you right now, you continuously are putting your hand out there. I want your hand closed. If your hand comes out past your shoulder blades going forward, I want your hand to be closed. Do you understand me? When he's going to say yes, and he's not going to be happy, and that's just life. That's the way things are. But you've put it out not only for him, you've put it out for the commission. They hear you. You put it out for the crowd there, and you put it out for the TV audience. Now, the one thing you got to do is once you say that, then you got to be a man of your word. He does it again, stop and start taking points. Look, he can close his hand. He knows. He's just more comfortable pairing with an open hand. And we allow them to do that, but we don't allow them to do it center line of the face. It's got to be outside of the center line of the face, and that wasn't happening.
So by doing that, now we fast forward to the end of the fight. We see that the finger pokes did have something to do with it. Then it presents the case of Chris was only eligible for the draw, but Bruno was eligible for the win. We go to the scorecards. The math works out in favor of Weidman, but the rules say he only gets the draw, and that's how we arrive at the technical draw.
That's how you would arrive at the technical draw.
And John, I have a question. We've seen it with a few fights recently. Do you think there'll ever become a time where a restart could occur? Like if a foul's missed? We saw it recently, like I think maybe 6 months ago, there was a fight at the Apex where I think it was at the Apex, or maybe it was at Noche UFC. It was somewhere in Vegas.
The Lacerda one.
Yeah, and there was Chris Taioni thought that a fighter was out, but he wasn't. And so then they went to the replay and they said he wasn't out. Would there be any reason why they couldn't just restart the fight from where they were?
Yeah, your problem with the restarting of the fight in that type of situation, and you're going to get this, and I've had situations similar to it. You're going to get one of the fighters or both of the fighters where they have now been told it's over, and the adrenaline and everything, and the nerves and the heart rate starts to go down and starts to drop off, and now all of a sudden they're told, "Oh, you're going to fight again." And one of them is going to say, "Hey, man, you took it all out of me, man. I had no fire." Go back to, Yoel Romero and Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy to this day complains about that whole thing when, look, it wasn't Yoel's corner that did it. It was a UFC cut man that I cannot take points from a fighter based upon a cut man. But Tim said, "Look, man, it took all the gas out of me. I thought I'd won the fight, and I just didn't have anything." And you could look at him and say, "I understand that. I can absolutely say that you're telling the truth and you're being honest about that. And there's no way to be totally fair to both guys in that." So I don't think there's going to be that point where you get to we're going to restart it, because someone's going to end up in that position where they go, "I was not able to get going again. You took that from me."
I have one final question for Big John. How crazy do your mentions get on Twitter and Instagram after these type of things?
Oh my God. I just get blasted.
And do you enjoy it?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no, because it's one of those ones that's like, I don't want to put anyone in a bad spot. I don't want to sit there and say, I believe this person was right. I believe this person was wrong. It's not an easy thing to do. I know them all. And it's sometimes, I'll give a quick little answer trying to, but as soon as I give one little answer, then it just starts to blow up and everyone's asking me more. And it's like, I blew it. I should have just kept my mouth shut. But,
John,
I get to do it on things like this. So this is easier.
Just because we have you here, I did try and go on your social media to see if you had addressed it. And I saw you address something else. Someone just brought knees to a grounded opponent to you. And it says you're working on that. And maybe by the end of the year, we might have something there. How likely is that?
Look, Andy Foster has, Andy Foster and I got together after the one incident, and we came up with verbiage that we thought would really work for changing it. And, back in 2016, we came out, I came out with trying to say, okay, you look at, if you want to be a grounded fighter, you're going to have to put both hands down, to say that you're grounded in that position. Meaning it used to be anything more than the soles of your feet says that you're, a part of your body, touching the ground means you're a grounded fighter. So, fighters were smart. They started putting one finger down at a time. And so we tried to use the two hands. Now, the whole purpose for the two hands was we didn't want people putting two hands. In fact, we were in the back, we're instructing them saying, look, we're telling you don't do this. Don't put two hands. In fact, you putting both hands is telling me that you're a little bit screwed up. I might stop your fight. I want you to drop to a knee and bring both of your hands up to protect your face or grab a hold of your opponent. That's what the rule was meant to do. But, politics and everything kind of got screwed up. So we've come up with a way of saying, all right, you want to be a grounded fighter? We're going to do it differently. And Andy's done a great job of going through and contacting all of the commission members from the different commissions, the tribal commissions. And it looks like right now that, everyone's on board with changing that. The problem with changing it is it's got to be voted on. ABC convention is coming up to be voted upon, and then it's going to take a little bit of time for them to bring it into effect so fighters can get used to what the new rule is. So, but it is being worked on, and hopefully it's going to take effect.
John, thanks for stopping by Spinning Back Clique at the last minute, and dare I say it, weighing in on this topic here. We really appreciate it. Folks, catch John and Josh Thompson on their great podcast. You can catch it on YouTube or podcast form. It's called Weighing In. Thanks, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. You take care.
All right, you too, sir. There you have it, guys. Great job hustling down big John McCarthy, fellas. We got to continue here, though. Hit that like button. I haven't bugged you in 45 minutes, but it really helps the show grow. And as you can see, we try our best to give you a show that's popping every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. The Junkie crew gets together, 4 of us, and we discuss the biggest topics in MMA. We go on now. Brandon Moreno steps away from MMA. He did not retire. There's no suspension, no significant injury. He's just good at the moment. What did you think of this decision? Seems kind of rather refreshing to hear an athlete just take time off, but not refer to it as a retirement. Danny Segura.
It was a surprise, but I would say I didn't really have like a shock factor after the fact. It was a surprise because I didn't see it coming, but once he said what he said, it all made sense. And I do think that this is the right move for Brandon Moreno. I don't feel like this is talked about enough, but like, you know, we always talk about mileage and damage. Dude, Brandon Moreno has been going through the ringer time and time again in these championship fights. I mean, the Pantoja fight, in my opinion, was the fight of the year for 2023. The fights with Davidson Figueiredo were insane as well. I mean, the dude's just been back to back to back in very grueling fights, 25 minutes, a lot of damage. And even prior to that, you know, he had a bit of a run as well where he had some tough fights. So I do think, you know, I don't necessarily advise always fighters to take time off. I think is actually quite the opposite. But in this case, I think it makes sense. I think he is a bit far from the title right now because of the loss to Brandon Royval. So he's going to have to put together at least a couple wins. You know, he doesn't have that immediate title shot looming. The division is going through a bit of a rough time right now. It needs to figure itself out. Take some time off. You deserve it. You're fortunately in a position that you can do that. A lot of fighters have to fight to make a living. I'd like to think that Brandon Moreno, being in so many championship fights, he's probably a bit set up to, you know, be able to take a break and recoup. And everything that he said makes sense. His body's tired. His mind is tired. You not so long ago mentioned how, you know, Alexa Grasso is now sort of the leader in Mexican MMA and Hispanic MMA. Well, Brandon was that, and he was that for so many years, and that's a heavy crown as well. So that's a lot of pressure, and he mentioned that as well. So I'm glad to see Brandon Moreno have that reflection to take a step back, and I'm glad that this is not a permanent sort of retirement, and that he will come back eventually. So all the best to Brandon, and looking forward to his return.
Yeah, Goes and I interviewed him before his last fight, and when we asked him about, hey, fighting in Mexico, do you feel pressure? He just shook his head like, yeah, I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy. And I bet you that also has something to do with it, man. He's kind of carried a nation, you know, on his back a little bit. And granted, he's got a couple homies there with Yair Rodriguez, Alexa Grasso that can help usher in, you know, Mexico, the PI, and the great athletes that they're going to produce. Nolan, I want to know, though, how does this affect the flyweight division? It's not the deepest out there, right? It's already kind of bare to begin with. What's the impact?
I mean, anytime you lose a contender, right, it's an issue. And a guy like Brandon Moreno is the perfect person that you can have some of these budding contenders fight to try to prove themselves at the top. So you never like to see a division lose a top contender when you're talking about the flow, when you're talking about just the, you know, the divisional cycle there. But I do agree with Danny. I think for Brandon Moreno, you know, he can't be thinking about that. He's going to prioritize himself. And I'd like to see fighters say, hey, you know, mentally, physically, let me just take a little time off, you know, recharge, et cetera, et cetera. So by no means am I saying he shouldn't be doing this, but yeah, I mean, especially right now where the flyweight division needs kind of stars. I mean, we have Pantoja fighting Usyk next, which I think surprised a lot of people. Not to say that, you know, Usyk's not a great fighter and that he wouldn't get there in a fight or two. But I think now that we're having somebody as low down in the rankings as he is jump up, I think it kind of shows what's going on here. And Makaev's kind of stalled a bit. Albazi, I believe, is hurt. Brandon Royval was hurt, and he just fought for the belt anyway. So things will figure themselves out. Guys will build off of each other. So I'm not putting flyweight in the grave by any means, but to me, Moreno taking time off, just there's one less piece of the puzzle for everybody to build off of. So good for him though. Hopefully he comes back charged up. He's had a crazy resume of fights in the last since he came back, really. I mean, from the start, he was fighting top 10 guys, I believe. So good on him for being, I don't want to say brave enough, but for putting himself first, which I think sometimes fighters have trouble doing that.
For sure. Lots of free time for Legos coming up for Brandon Moreno. Let's talk about Bobby Knuckles versus Borg in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That's what's up. I love hearing announcements like that catch you out of nowhere. I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this main event. Is it popping enough for the UFC's debut in Saudi Arabia? Let's go back to Beantown. Nolan King.
Love it. Fantastic. This is exactly what I think we were hoping for with the last Saudi card, and it seemed like things weren't really stacking up to being that level. We didn't see the finalized product, but we saw what ended up happening at the Apex, and it's clear these two cards side by side are totally almost different products. The 5 fights that they've announced for Saudi Arabia thus far, all interesting, just a very deep fight night. And I mean, the main event, man, that's the main attraction, even without all the supporting acts. This is one of those, this is about as good as it gets on free TV sort of main events. Chimaev finally back after quite a layoff, taking on Robert Whittaker, who I don't even have to explain to anybody watching this what we've come to expect out of him. So just a really interesting fight at 185, one that has real implications. 5 rounds where the questions will definitely be answered as opposed to 3. And I just love it, man. It's big, and I hope that it's selfishly, I hope it's on in the day here as well. It would just check all the boxes for me. Big card on ABC as well. The return to ABC for the UFC.
How does this impact the title picture at middleweight? Like Nolan said, big implications, right? Well, we've seen Dana White says the winner of Chimaev and Usman gets this. The winner of Muhammad and Burns gets this. That bullshit didn't happen. Can the winner of this fight leapfrog Adesanya or Strickland in the DDP sweepstakes?
I think they can. We have to be a little bit more clear with Adesanya all the time and figure out what exactly is going on. But a guy like Hamza, I think they've just been looking for an excuse to throw him in that type of situation. And Bobby Knuckles to come back, and if he were to get a win over Hamza, if you look at those two, the way they fight, odds are it's probably not going to go to a judge's decision. And if he gets a finish, then yeah, I think he's got a pretty good case as well. But I mean, this is great storytelling. This is one where, for as much as we come down on the UFC, I think they did a great job with this one. Does Hamzat have what it takes? Is Bobby Knuckles back? I think it's great storytelling, and I give him thumbs up for this.
Mm-hmm. And Danny, what would you say? Was this worth the delay? Remember, they were going to do something earlier this year, and that card, I think, just wasn't kind of coming together. Yeah. This one looks pretty good compared to what they did earlier this year. Couple Russians thrown in the co-main event, Volkov and Pavlovich. What are your thoughts here? Should the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia be happy now?
Yeah, it's a pretty big jump, right? That last card was Apex quality, and this is proper ABC quality. Like, this is one of the best fight nights that you can probably put together in this year. So yeah, a quality 100%, an event that people are going to be interested in. Just real quick, I do think that Hamza Chimaev should have just gotten the title shot. Didn't he win the title eliminator bout against Usman and then just have, I don't know, somebody else fight Whittaker on, I guess, Saudi Arabia, Hamza. I get all that, but I don't know. I guess it bothers me the fact that he fought a number 1 contenders fight, won it, and now he's in another one. Let's see if it's going to be 3 in a row or what.
Yeah. Can't figure the UFC out, man. They say one thing and do another. That's why we sound so cynical at times. Let's address Bitegate. Almost 2 weeks ago at the UFC on ESPN 53 card, Igor Severino was disqualified for biting his opponent, Andre Lima, mid-fight. Yeah, you heard that right. That's exactly what went down for those that maybe don't follow the sport every week. Severino was then cut from the UFC, and the NAC has held his purse. Now, in an exclusive interview with Nolan King a few days ago, Severino gave his part of the story. So, Nolan, what was your biggest takeaways after chatting with Severino? And did that change your whole opinion of the incident?
I'm not sure that it changed it necessarily. I kind of had mixed feelings going into it, but I would say this. I feel like I walked away from that interview with the sense of, I feel like everyone handled something that was so wrong very properly. Like, I think the UFC was, not everyone, I'll get to the people that didn't, but the UFC handled it, I think, in a way that many of us find acceptable. Having a zero tolerance policy for something like that. I mean, that's just about as egregious of a foul as you can have in MMA. So I don't fault them. I don't fault them for cutting him. I also give him a lot of credit for accepting responsibility for it, for apologizing. He, in the interview we did, obviously I wrote a story on it, but we talked for about 50 minutes. There was a bit of a language barrier there, so it did take a little bit of time for it to kind of flow. But I could tell through hearing him in some of his answers and the emotion that he was presenting, he'd be talking and I could hear him start to tear up or to kind of get the frog in his throat a bit. And I wouldn't know exactly what he was saying until it came back to me. So to me, it felt very genuine. He apologized more times than I could count. I included like one apology in there, but I would say that every other question that we talked about started with some form of an apology. So good on him for kind of absorbing the blame. I would say the two things that, I don't feel necessarily great about, the Nevada Athletic Commission withholding his purse. We've seen it before with kind of other egregious fouls. I think that can be debated on whether that's right or wrong, to not give him his show money. I think the other thing is too absolutely disgusting, people threatening his family, which is the answer that he was definitely getting a little bit very emotional through. He couldn't finish his answers at times. He had to take a break. So that's obviously about as despicable and gross as it gets to start dragging family members of fighters that you watched on TV who did something wrong and threatening them. That's just next level terrible. As of where it goes from here, I do like to think that there's a path for somebody that doesn't have a history, who's 20 years old, who has a pretty good reputation. I didn't just hear it from his side. I went out and I kind of talked to some of the other very connected Brazilian managers, promoters about him. Seems like he has a good reputation in the gym. Promoters haven't had a problem with him, no issues. So I think, there should be some sort of road to redemption for him. Now, what is that? What is that road? Will it be the UFC again? I wouldn't hold it against the UFC if they didn't want to take that risk again after what happened, if they feel liable, like, hey, this guy did something really wrong in your promotion and then you brought him back. And what if he does it again? Or what if something happens? But I certainly don't think he should have to wear like a scarlet letter for his whole career and never get to fight again. But even if I'm the UFC, I think down the line, a couple of years from now, if he continues to be on the straight path and he continues to win, like, I think it's something that should be revisited for sure. So definitely a strange scenario, very unusual, but I do think outside of a foul that he doesn't even remember, according to him, which some people will say, oh, like this guy's just, of course he doesn't remember doing something, but these guys do get hit in the head. So I'm never going to rule out that guys get hit with a concussion, guys get irrationally angry. Like, I used to work on an ambulance before I worked for MMA Junkie, and some of the people I would see there, old ladies would turn into absolute just angry individuals, right? Because they were dealing with getting hit in the head or concussion or something. So I understand how it's an easy out. I also understand like the reality of the sport is people can kind of have those same issues happen. Nobody's going to know except him if that's true or not. So I would like to see a road to redemption at some point if he continues his behavior, but I understand if promotions aren't willing to give him that second chance.
George might have frozen there on us.
Yeah, seems like.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to swing it over to Goes. What do you think, Goes?
Look, what I'm going to say about this is, look, he made about as bad as a mistake as you can do in our sport, right? But is it something that he can't come back from? I think he can. I mean, he did all of the right things in the beginning, right? Saying all the right stuff with Nolan. I think that's very important to be accountable for what you do. But one thing that you have to be consistent with the UFC is, I agree with your punishment. He probably had to go. I agree with that. But you better be consistent with it, right? If Chimaev bites somebody, he better be gone too. Otherwise, people are going to go, what the hell's going on here, right? That's one of the big problems. But if you look at like the history of combat sports, when you think of a guy like, say, Mike Tyson, how many times do we ever go, you mean the guy that bit Holyfield's ear off? Like, nobody really talks about that much anymore. You can come back from things, right? Especially when it happens early on in your career. I think there is opportunity for him to make amends. It's going to be a long road back, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, I would say that for Severino, I have a bit of a soft spot for him. I come from the world of I tune in and I watch. I'm a big fan of soccer, and we've seen Luis Suarez bite multiple people. And in soccer games, this is combat sports, so I don't want to play down the bite, but I really hope this doesn't sort of mark the rest of his career. No pun intended there. I mean, the guy was undefeated prior to this fight. Young kid, just 20 years old, was born in 2003. We all make mistakes. The fight was a banger. I would like to see him get some sort of redemption, whether it's the PFL or somewhere else, because outside of the bite, that's a talented prospect right there. That guy has a lot to give to the sport. So, yes, take it easy on him, guys. Even the guy that got bit is saying that he shouldn't lose his job, that it's okay, that it was in the heat of the moment. So if you're out there watching, don't go out there threatening his family and threatening him. Take it easy on the guy. So, yeah, I'm glad. I hope that Severino makes a comeback, just like Gigi's connection here. I mean, that was fast, my man.
Sorry about that. I'm in South America. I apologize to the audience. Hopefully I don't miss a beat here. I do want to close up the show, but I want to just go to Goes here. Goes, we've seen Dana White induct, or they're going to induct Wanderlei Silva this summer in the Hall of Fame. Remember, at one point, he wanted nothing to do with him. So he's reversed course. Now, granted, he forgot about the incident, right? But then we also saw Paul Daly sucker punch Josh Koscheck about 15 years ago. Never let him back in the UFC. What do you think happens here? Because
I think eventually, if he continues to win, I think he could be back in the UFC one day. Like Danny said, that there are a lot of bad things that have happened that people have been able to come back from, and he's young, he has time. I think he can make it back. Not soon, but eventually.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't know what's going on with Gigi's connection, but hopefully, I kind of jinxed it there. Hopefully, Severino does make a comeback, not like Gigi's connection, and actually sticks around the UFC. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Spinning Back Clique. Remember, give the video a thumbs up if you're so kind. Remember, check out the exclusive that Nolan got as well if you want more details on Severino's comment on the whole biting incident. And keep it locked here on MMA Junkie. We got tons of goodies for you, interviews, live streams, all kinds of things. So go out there and be a champion like Gigi says, and we'll see you guys next week.